it's great to be joined in the studio by our guests today. Let's say hello to Quentin, aka Mr. Melise. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, thank you. Thanks ever so much for having me, Chris.
And we've also got David Smith as well from the council. Councillor Smith, how are you doing?
I'm very good, Chris. Good to see you.
But in your civilian attire today, because you're just here as David, or a bit of both.
Well, hey, I became a councillor by being David, maybe, so let's be David.
Amazing. So the reason that we're here today is to talk about how you two ended up collaborating and the project that you're doing together. So who wants to kind of start off summarising what's going on?
Should we talk about how we met?
Let's start at that magical moment. Yeah, absolutely. So it was way back in, was it 2021?
I think so, November
2021. So Quentin was nominated for an International Men's Day award, and there I was going through the nominations, and it kind of jumped out at me.
So you were a judge for the awards?
So I was a judge for the awards, yeah. And I just had to meet Quentin. So on the night for the awards, he didn't win. There was someone even more worthy.
We went there.
Sorry, it hurts, but I'm sorry. And I just went and found him and introduced myself and just said, what I've read about you, what I've heard about you. I just simply had to meet you and have a chat.
So what had he done that had made him worthy of an award?
It was his youth work, I think we were looking at the time. And that's something that was close to my heart. And what was evident and continues to really shine is Quentin's can communicate with young people in a way that so few people can, and it was magical, and you continue to see that now. And he reaches many people. Something we did very, very recently, or something that Quentin did at the last full council meeting. I had my report to present. Some may say boring. I don't think so. But Quentin,
No.
He came along to speak about my report, and he delivered some moving poetry.
What was your report about?
It was just my cabinet report, so it was everything that's going on within my portfolio. But Quentin took the opportunity to speak at full council, and he delivered a fantastic piece of poetry.
Which must be quite an intimidating thing, because it's a very different environment to what you're probably used to, just sitting in a room full of very, very serious, very intense people sat around in their own little mini parliament here in Northampton. What was that experience like?
Well, I've got to say, I've been a poet for a while. I've been a poet for a number of years now. I started off in dance music, actually, and with UK hip hop, and it kind of progressed and evolved into poetry. So I've been in front of a number of audiences, and they're quite diverse, the audiences, published by UNICEF, and presenting and working with UNICEF as well. So it can be quite intense, especially at full council meeting with all of the councillors there. But I'm driven by passion, and I was there for a reason. It was to remember young Fred, who had passed last year on the 22nd of March, and so I was there for Fred and to represent Fred's family and to communicate kind of on behalf of Fred's family and to pay tribute. And so that's kind of what drove me.
Do you know, I mean, as a sort of representing the community and having seen how things affect people, has that been a bit of a turning point? Has that kind of made people a bit more aware of the problems with knife crime and things like that?
Yeah, I always say, if you're trying to get a message across, it's quite important to kind of appeal to hearts and minds, because you want your message to resonate with others. You want people to be able to relate to it, to what it is you're saying, and the message that you're coming from, and the proactivity that comes with it. So you want the listeners, or you want the wider community to be involved, to be kind of invested and to be committed, because then that's how we galvanize action off of the back of that passion and that want for making a difference and for making a change. So I've used poetry and music as a tool to be able to communicate across the board to diverse audiences. It could be year 5 and 6s when I do assemblies at schools. It could be academics in universities. Again, you know, councillors and MPs, and so it goes across the board. I think poetry in particular is quite a universal language. It's a way to, we've all grown up on poetry, you know, from you know, nursery rhymes upwards, and it's our way of speaking. We wrote poetry. Well, actually, we recited poetry before we could write. So it's deep seated, and I kind of use that as a catalyst to move our message forward.
I think there's things that you can say with poetry that are very difficult to say in other ways because of the way that it works and the way that you can just kind of use people's imagination and take them on a journey with your words, and it's such a powerful tool. You've actually got a poem that you can perform for us today, which is on this subject of knife crime. It's called Knife Sentence.
That's right. So Knife Sentence for me was a little bit of a life changer. I was in a little bit of a challenged time in my life, and for whatever reason I just felt that I wanted to address what I was seeing in the news with regards to serious youth violence and knife crime itself. I'm a victim of knife crime. I'll tell you more about that afterwards, but it was, I'd never peeled back the layers. I never got an opportunity to process what had happened. There was quite a lot of bravado and kind of brushing it under the carpet, what had happened. You know, I say that respectfully and sensitively to those that are listening, but I think that this was my first opportunity to communicate my thoughts, my feelings, my worries, my concerns, and so just spilled my heart on the sleeve. And
when you were a victim of knife crime, was this a time when you were carrying a knife yourself and you kind of felt the need to protect yourself, and kind of it's a bit more complicated?
Right, so never carried a knife, never carried a weapon. I've been, what they say is that on the peripheries of gangs. In a number of interviews, they always say he was on the peripheries of gangs, but I think that comes from me positioning myself as an example of change, understanding that I've kind of made mistakes, but learning from those mistakes. The only mistake that you make are the ones that you don't learn from. So never been involved in gangs, but having made mistakes and showing young people and demonstrating to young people that it's never too late to change. So knowing people that have carried knives, not necessarily being affiliated, but knowing that they're around, and I think that's how I've got relatability with some of the young people that I speak to today, because I kind of understand what they're seeing. You know, I've been a part of that, not detaching myself in any way. I'm open and honest about the mistakes that I've made, but the key thing is I've never walked with a knife, and I think in that, you know, I don't know what would have happened if it was 20 years later. It was a lot different. The lay of the land was a lot different back then. So there wasn't so much scaremongering, so much fear. You know, social media at play. A lot of young people pick up knives because they think other young people have got knives. So that communication never necessarily filtered down so much where I felt. And it's wrong to believe that you should carry a knife, but the pressure's there. So that I never had that pressure. As a victim of knife crime, I was just in a silly altercation, which I regret, and which is why I talk to young people about choices and about consequences. It was something that escalated, that altercation, and not to advocate the altercation in the first place as well.
But that's the thing, that people fall out all the time. People have arguments, but when you're carrying a knife, suddenly the stakes are raised, and it can be so much more dangerous.
That's right. I think it's 51% more likely to be injured by your own knife, because what's happening is, you know, if you're being chased away, you drop the knife on the floor, they might pick it up, and also you're escalating, you're making yourself more of a target. No one's necessarily going to engage in an altercation or in conflict knowing that you've got a knife. It's more likely to make them want to carry a knife, and so it escalates it. And that's the kind of message that we try to share with young people, that although they feel safe, they're more likely to be harmed if they carry a knife. It's sending out the wrong message.
It's quite a grim anniversary. It's been 2 years since the Knife Angel was here in Northampton, and the council are going to be marking the anniversary every year with various events, just to kind of keep keep those messages at the forefront of people's minds. What have we got planned for this year?
So we've got the legacy service, so a week on Friday, the 17th of May. So we've got a service. Quentin's going to be doing a reading.
Yeah.
I'll be doing a reading. But the legacy service, the drive to do it was to mark obviously the visit of the Knife Angel, but to keep that legacy going and to reminding us all to keep on keeping conversation, violent crime, knife crime. So mums, dads, aunties, aunts, brothers, sisters, so they're talking about it, because if they're talking about it, then they're aware of it, and we're not looking to normalise it. But if you're sensitive to these things, and then if a young person, somebody or whatever, feels confident to actually mention somebody carrying a knife or whatever else, because it's about diverting and there are alternatives, and on Friday it's an important event. Invite anybody to come along. The doors are not closed. The doors are absolutely open to that service.
And is that next Friday?
Next Friday, yeah.
Yeah. From what time?
I think it's 7:00.
Okay.
And then they've got the vigil after that, so the candlelight vigil.
And that's at the church in the centre.
Yeah. So All
town.
Saints Church. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, now we did promise some live poetry from Quentin, and you've got this the poem that we were talking about before, the knife sentence poem, which kind of draws on your own experiences with being a victim of knife crime, and kind of looks at it from different sides.
That's right. It looks at it from the perspective of a perpetrator, and it looks at it from a victim. But I won't do a long intro because we did it just before the break, so I'll go straight into it. So this is called Knife Sentence then. Have we ever stopped to ask that boy that carries a knife what he wants to do when he's older? If his parents are still together and who his role models are? Because I guarantee you he don't live next door to a doctor. Instead, he's more than likely to be riding with thugs, and they're the ones in the community prescribing the drugs and driving those cars. And I wonder if, as a teenager, he's watching how the olders carry themselves and its learned behaviour. I wonder if by the age of 12 he never had a father, and why? At the age of 13 he had his first balaclava. Was he ever scared? Is it the mum don't care? Is it just that she was never there? Maybe she's out trying to provide for the family, and by the time she gets back she feels tired and angry. Are the arguments at home? Is there a lack of affection? Are the boys outside offering you protection? From the youths up the road in a different postcode, the reason why you always go the long way home. So the olders on the block become your bigger brothers. Now it's almost as if you're related to each other. Gang related. Now we've got a council estate kid filled with hatred who needs to be initiated before he's fully affiliated. Is that environment just making him numb? Does he have a choice, or is it safety in numbers? Because they're not meant to be your mentors. That's what we need grown men for, to lead by example and to nurture ambition, to teach discipline, to understand and to listen. And I apologise for generalising, for coming across like I'm stereotyping, but we all need to know we are marginalising a whole generation when we criminalise them. Who really wants to end up in prison or dying? And the social networks make it all look exciting. The way that gangs incite violence live online and it's followed by an advert to make sure we're still buying. And I'm not about to blame this all on drill, but thoughts become words, and words become real. So tell me there's not a vested interest in what's manifesting when all the kids can hear is I splashed him and I chefed him, dipped him outside of his house and then left him. For his mum to find him? Have you been to a funeral and heard a mother crying when her son's in the ground? It sounds like she's dying. And it's been like this for years, wiping those tears and printing those T's saying, put the knife down, blaming police, writing to our local MPs. I've seen mums at knife crime rallies begging on their knees like, they've took my son, but make it stop, please. And it's our responsibility. Have you heard it takes a village to raise a child? But we're losing our community, so they're left to run wild. And this isn't the time for answers or excuses, but the youngers need to know there's consequences for their offences. Justice will be served if you're caught or let go. Because when you take a life, you forfeit your own.
So powerful. So that poem, have you been kind of using that in different schools and kind of community settings? And is that something that you're going to be performing at the vigil next week, or do you have something else?
I've got another poem actually called Where the Angels Walk. but this poem is almost a signature poem, and the poem here is one that opens up conversation. It opens up dialogue. It looks at the adverse childhood experiences of an offender almost, and what kind of, they didn't just wake up one day and become an offender. There must be a reason. So it peels back the layers and it talks about that. And then, of course, it empathizes and sympathizes with the victim and the victim's families. And it looks at that ripple effect of how, almost when you throw a stone in a lake, and how those ripples radiate out and permeate out into the community. So I wanted to be able to touch on that. And so I take that into schools and share it with people as young as year 5, so kind of 8-9-year-olds. Through to secondary school and up into kind of colleges and pupil referral units. So people take little parts of it. I think when I first wrote it, I wrote it in kind of 2019 now, and the chief inspector of Northampton, one of the chief inspectors in Northampton, said it was one of the best pieces of media that he had heard that addresses serious violence. And so he took that and shared it with other police forces. And one thing led to another, whereby I was being invited to conferences and talking about the work that I'm doing in schools and in youth organisations and with other charities. And then, so it's been the core part of a lot that I do at the moment, with myself and my team and with Councillor David Smith.
And are you getting a sense that the tide's starting to turn and minds are starting to be changed, that there's less people carrying knives?
I'm with you on that. I very definitely think that there has been a shift towards proactivity and a look towards making real change and a real difference, like tangible, noticeable and sustainable change. The fact that Councillor David Smith and I are sitting here today, I think, is indicative of a partnership, that kind of is across sections and multifaceted. I think with councillors and with people like myself who may have a little bit of an ear to the street, and kind of I position myself as almost a kind of a middleman, like a conduit between the streets and the authorities almost. So I do think there has been a shift. There's a reduction in offences in Northamptonshire in itself, in particular.
Do you think this is kind of the way things need to go? That the two of you obviously have struck up a great friendship from working together on these projects, but it's really about seeing people who are on the streets, people who are in kind of these situations as human beings, as individuals, getting to know them as people, and that's the way to kind of crack this, is just to bring everyone together.
That's right. There's unity in community, and I do say, often people say, are they hard to reach? But I say, are you hard to reach, or is it hard for them to reach you? So it's key that we have outreach work, and I think there's a representation on both levels in the way that David and I work, or if that's kind of representative of some of the conversations that I'm having with West Northamptonshire Council as well. I think that we've got to be open-minded. We've got to look at new ways and innovative ways and refreshing ways almost to make change, because what's happened in the past, is it working? I don't know, but we know that there are areas to work on, and I think it's quite ahead of the curve, and it's quite forward thinking that we're linking in like this and working together as a partnership and a collaboration.
Fantastic. And what's the future got in store?
Well, hopefully good things. That's the $1 million question, isn't it? Change and improvement, understanding and acceptance. Hopefully that's what the future holds, and that's genuine. That's from the heart. I've been closely touched by knife crime, and never thought it would happen. I won't touch any further on that, but it's really understanding people, giving people alternatives, and there's a lot of work, early interventions, but it's giving people, young people on occasion, some hope and direction, because sometimes it's a challenging environment out there. And I didn't grow up with social media, but it's just coming at you. It's like being on the motorway and you're doing 1 million miles an hour and everything's really coming at you. So sometimes I think people can not understand the challenges that young people have, and that's what we're trying to do: understand those challenges and help them grow up into great people and really achieve their maximum potential.
I think it's really nice that the council is doing these kind of initiatives and kind of being a lot more mindful of the best way to actually reach young people with these messages, rather than just ticking the boxes. You actually do seem to be, thinking about what's actually going to have some good outcomes.
Well, it's all about those outcomes. I mean, we've got the Community Safety Partnership, and we've got various partners within that, whether it be housing, the police, the Commissioner's Office, etc., etc. And certainly not box ticking. I could not allow that from my perspective. It's not about box ticking. I mean, and you're not suggesting, you're saying it is at all. It's about making change and course correcting, because something might work today, it's not necessarily going to work tomorrow. But that's where it's the relationship that we've got with Quentin, for example. He sees things that I don't see. I see things that he doesn't see, and that collaboration and working together, and just being focused on making improvement where we can. And I think it's worth mentioning any improvements in improvement. Whether it, the tiniest thing, if it moves things forward and improves things, it's an improvement. And some of the work we're doing, I think, is millimetre movements forward. And it's maybe in 2-3 years' time we'll see other further changes. We don't know, but we're on track doing this, and we're going to keep doing it. We're not going to give up.
Yeah. Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming in today, both of you, and thank you for performing that poem. That was a really amazing moment.
Thanks ever so much for having us.
And if people would like to come along to the vigil, can you just remind us where it is next Friday?
All Saints Church, Friday evening. I believe it's 7:00 kick-off.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.